She doesn't belong at this table. She never did. My mother-in-law didn't lower her voice when she said it. She didn't need to. The entire dining room heard her, and no one looked away fast enough to pretend they hadn't. My husband stared at his plate. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and smiled at no one in particular. My name is Maya Hartwell. I'm 29 years old. I have a master's degree in financial planning, a salary that most people in that room would not believe if I told them, and apparently, I do not belong at the table I have been quietly funding for the past 4 years. I noted that, filed it away, said nothing. That was a Thursday night in October, 3 weeks before everything changed. Let me tell you what nobody in that room understood yet. I had already started. I met my husband Derek at a work conference 6 years ago. He was charming and funny, and the kind of man who made you feel like the only person in any room. His family felt warm at first, the way a fireplace does when you're cold and tired. His mother hugged me at the door the first time I visited. His father shook my hand with both of his and called me sweetheart. His younger sister braided my hair after dinner and asked me to teach her how to do a French twist. I thought I had found the family I always wanted. What I actually found was a vacancy I was expected to fill. Derek's family ran a small landscaping business that had been struggling for years before I came into the picture. His father had made some expansions that didn't land. His mother had co-signed on equipment loans without fully reading the terms. His sister had dropped out of college twice and was working part-time at a nail salon, not because she had to, but because ambition felt optional when someone else always covered the gap. That someone became me. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't understand when you try to explain it later. It starts small enough that each individual moment feels like generosity, like love, like just being a good partner. Derek's father needed a short-term bridge to cover payroll 1 month. Derek asked me with his eyes before he even opened his mouth, and I wrote the check. His mother's car needed a transmission repair that was more than she had saved. I took care of it because she cried when she told me about it, and I genuinely couldn't stand to watch her cry. His sister needed a co-signer on an apartment lease because her credit wasn't there yet. Derek said it would only be for a year, just until she built her score. I signed. Each of those things, on its own, was fine. Together, over time, they became architecture. They became the load-bearing walls of a house I didn't know I was building for other people to live in. By the time Derek and I got married, I was already the family's financial weather system. When something went wrong, they looked at the sky and waited for me to rain money down on the problem. They never said it out loud. They didn't have to. It was simply understood, the way certain rules are understood in certain households without ever being written down. What changed was the year I got promoted. My firm moved me into a senior analyst role with a compensation package that made my previous salary look like a practice run. I was proud. I was genuinely, deeply proud of myself in a way I hadn't felt since I graduated. I told Derek over dinner the night I got the offer letter. He kissed me and said he always knew I would get there. By the following week, his mother had already factored my raise into plans she hadn't consulted me about. She wanted to expand the business. New equipment. New truck, new crew. She'd found a commercial property to lease for storage and operations. She needed someone with good credit and documented income to co-sign the business loan. Derek presented it to me on a Sunday morning, casually, over coffee, like it was already decided, and this was just the paperwork step. I didn't say yes that morning. I said I needed to think about it. His mother called me that afternoon. She didn't ask. She walked me through why it made sense, why it was the right thing to do for the family, why my promotion was a blessing for everyone. She used the word everyone twice. She did not use the word please once. I signed the loan documents 10 days later. What I didn't tell anyone was what I was also doing during those 10 days. I had started a conversation with my own attorney, not about the loan, about everything. I want to be precise here because precision matters when people try to rewrite history later. I did not sign that loan because I was foolish. I signed it because I was still hoping that the version of this family I had fallen in love with in the beginning was the real one, and the other version, the one that treated me like a resource, was just a phase they would eventually grow out of. Some hopes are expensive. The dinner in October was my mother-in-law's birthday. She had planned it herself, invited 40 people, booked a private room at a restaurant I had suggested, and she had immediately claimed as her own idea. I had quietly paid the deposit when the restaurant confirmed it was required to hold the room. I was seated at the far end of the table, next to Derek's aunt, who spent the first course telling me about her knee surgery in surgical detail. Derek was 3 seats away, laughing at something his cousin said. His mother held court at the head of the table like a woman who had earned everything she had through sheer force of personality rather than through the quiet financial infrastructure of a daughter-in-law she had decided she didn't like. I don't know what exactly prompted what she said. I was not performing badly. I was not causing a scene. I was simply sitting there, eating my salad, being present in the room the way a woman who paid the deposit is entitled to be present in a room. She was in the middle of a story about Derek as a child, and someone at the table, I think his cousin's wife, made a comment about how lucky Derek was to have such a supportive wife. A harmless compliment. The kind of thing people say at family dinners. My mother-in-law smiled the particular smile she reserved for things she found irritating but couldn't say so directly. Then she turned toward the end of the table and looked at me. "She doesn't belong at this table," she said. "She never did." The cousin's wife laughed nervously and looked away. The aunt beside me stopped talking about her knee. Derek's fork clinked against his plate as he set it down. The table waited. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, and smiled at no one in particular. I did not say a word. But under the table, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed 2 words to myself, a reminder, a timestamp. Tonight counts. Derek came to bed late that night. I was reading, or pretending to. He lay down beside me without touching me and stared at the ceiling. "She didn't mean it the way it sounded," he said. "How did it sound to you?" I asked. He didn't answer for a long time. Then, "She's been stressed about the business." I closed my book, put it on the nightstand, turned off the lamp. "Okay," I said. He seemed relieved that I wasn't going to make it into something. He turned over and went to sleep. I lay in the dark for a while, very still, thinking about the word okay and all the different things it can mean depending on who says it and why. The next morning, I made my first appointment with a financial divorce attorney. Not a divorce attorney. A financial attorney who specialized in untangling commingled assets before they got any more tangled. I had been putting this off for months. A quiet voice in me had been saying not yet every time I thought about actually starting. After that Thursday night, the voice changed. I want to be honest about something. The plan wasn't revenge. I know the way these stories are supposed to go. The scorched earth moment. The dramatic confrontation. The satisfaction of watching someone realize what they lost. That's not what this was. What this was much quieter and much more permanent. I was simply going to stop being a load-bearing wall. Over the next 6 weeks, I moved carefully. I made a list of every financial obligation I had taken on that was not mine by any definition except that I had agreed to it. The business loan co-signature. The apartment lease for my sister-in-law. 3 credit cards that Derek and I held jointly, 2 of which he had never once paid the balance on. A car loan that was technically in both our names, but which I had been making payments on alone since the beginning because Derek's account was always just a little short. I also made a list of what was mine entirely. My investment accounts, which I had kept separate since before we married, and which had grown substantially. My work benefits, my retirement contributions, my emergency fund that I had built quietly and mentioned to no one. I met with my attorney twice. Then I met with my financial planner. Then I sat alone in a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon and looked at both lists for a long time. I was not destroyed. I was expensive, and I was still whole. That distinction mattered. The business loan was the complicated one. You cannot simply unsign a co-signature. My attorney had explained this to me at our first meeting with the patience of someone who had explained it many times before. You can, however, notify the lender that you are withdrawing consent for any future modifications, and you can begin the process of requesting a cosigner release, which requires demonstrating that the primary borrower can sustain the loan independently. It is slow. It is bureaucratic. It involves paperwork that makes you feel like you are moving underwater. I started the process anyway. The joint credit cards were simpler. I called each issuer, removed myself from the accounts I hadn't opened, and opened my own. I moved the balances I was legitimately responsible for. The rest I left exactly where they were. The car loan I transferred into Derek's name alone. He would find out when the paperwork arrived. I was prepared for that conversation. The apartment co-signature was in process. My sister-in-law had better credit now after 2 years of on-time payments, which were on time because I had set up the reminder system on her behalf and periodically covered the shortfall without being asked. She could refinance on her own. She just hadn't needed to yet. I circled a date on my calendar and read. My attorney had said that by that date, the majority of the financial untangling would be complete or in formal process. Not everything would be done, but enough would be done that I could have the conversation with Derek that I had been postponing. The conversation didn't wait for my circled date. It came on a Saturday afternoon in late November, 4 weeks after the birthday dinner, when Derek came home from his parents' house looking the way he always looked when he had agreed to something on my behalf and hadn't told me yet. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop open, going over some numbers. He sat down across from me and folded his hands the way he did when he wanted to seem calm. "My mom wants to know about the expansion loan," he said. I kept my eyes on my screen. "What about it?" "The bank called her. There's some kind of flag on the account." He paused. "Did you contact them?" I closed my laptop slowly. "I did." His expression shifted. "Maya, I notified them that I'm beginning the cosigner release process," I said. "It's a standard procedure. It takes several months. Nothing has changed about the existing loan terms." He stared at me. "Why would you do that without telling us?" I noticed the us. I noticed it the way you notice a word that reveals something the speaker didn't mean to reveal. "I did tell you," I said. "About 18 months ago. I told you that I wasn't comfortable being co-signed on a business I have no ownership stake in. You said you'd talk to your parents about it. Did you?" He didn't answer. "Derek," I said. "Did you talk to them?" "It's not that simple." "I know," I said. "That's why I waited 18 months. He pushed back from the table and stood up. His voice was rising, not to anger yet, but approaching it. "This is going to create a serious problem for them. They are in the middle of an expansion. If the bank reviews the cosigner situation right now, they might pause the loan." "That's possible," I agreed. "You don't even seem upset about that." "I'm not upset about it," I said. "I'm resolving a situation that should have been resolved a long time ago." He left the kitchen and went to his office. I heard him on the phone almost immediately, his voice low and tight. I knew who he was calling. His mother called me 45 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 9 minutes long. I listened to it once, noted the parts that were relevant, and did not call back. The following week, Derek's father called. He was more measured than his wife, which made him, in some ways, harder to navigate. He laid out the situation as though I had not considered it, as though the simple act of describing the problem would reveal to me that I had made an error. "We're not asking for anything new," he said. "We're asking you to hold what you already agreed to." "I understand that's how it feels," I said. "But I agreed to it conditionally, on the assumption that the arrangement was temporary. It's been 3 years. The business has had 3 profitable quarters. The bank will likely grant the release. And if they don't, then we continue working through the process." There was a pause. "You're doing this to punish us," he said. "No," I said. "I'm doing this to protect myself. There's a difference, even if it feels the same from where you're standing." He didn't understand that. I hadn't expected him to. The family luncheon was my mother-in-law's idea, naturally. She scheduled it for the Sunday before Christmas, a command performance dressed up as a holiday gathering. She invited everyone in the extended family who might, through their presence, apply pressure. Derek told me about it 3 days beforehand, watching my face carefully as he said it. "I think you should come," he said. "I think it would help." "Help what?" I asked. "Help everyone calm down." I thought about that for a moment. I thought about the birthday dinner, the table, the wine glass, the smile at no one in particular. I thought about my circled date on the calendar, which had come and gone the week before, and what was now formalized in documents I had signed in my attorney's office. "All right," I said. "I'll come." He was relieved. He shouldn't have been. I want to explain why I went, because it's the kind of thing that looks confusing from the outside. I went because I had done nothing wrong and I had no intention of behaving as though I had. I went because I had documents in my bag that I had not yet shown anyone, and that gathering, with its audience, was as good a moment as any to stop letting a single, heavily edited version of the story go unchallenged. And if I'm being fully honest, I went because I was tired of the particular loneliness of knowing the truth about a situation and watching other people confidently narrate a different one. The house was full when I arrived. Derek walked ahead of me through the front door and was absorbed almost immediately by the room. I helped myself to a glass of water, found a chair near the back of the living room, and waited. My mother-in-law worked the room with the energy of a woman who had been rehearsing. She touched arms, filled glasses, laughed at things that weren't quite funny. She did not acknowledge me when I came in, which was, by that point, something I had grown used to. My sister-in-law sat down next to me, at one point, briefly. She looked uncomfortable. "I don't really know what's going on," she said quietly. "Derek just said there was family stuff." "There is," I said. She looked at me sideways. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. My mother-in-law called the room to attention just after everyone had filled their plates. She didn't use a glass or a spoon. She just raised her voice and waited for the room to come to her, which it did. "I want to say something," she began, "about what it means to be a family." I set my fork down. She talked about loyalty. She talked about sacrifice. She talked about the business that my father-in-law had built over 20 years, the employees who depended on it, the legacy it represented. She talked about the difficult period they were navigating and the unexpected complications they had encountered. She did not use my name, but she looked at me exactly twice while she was talking, and both times the room followed her gaze. When she paused for breath, Derek's uncle said, "What's actually happening? Someone fill us in." My mother-in-law straightened. "Maya has decided to remove herself from the loan we took out to grow the business. Without warning. Without discussion. Putting everything we've built at risk." Heads turned. Someone made a low sound of surprise. "That's what family looks like now," my mother-in-law said, and her voice had the texture of something rehearsed. I let the room sit with that for exactly 3 seconds. Then I reached into my bag. I had printed everything on clean white paper, organized in a folder, the way I would present anything professionally. I placed it on the coffee table in front of me and stood up. "I'd like to add some context," I said. My mother-in-law's expression went flat. "This isn't the time." "I think it is," I said pleasantly. "Since we're sharing the story." I did not raise my voice. I didn't have to. The room was already quiet. I walked through it methodically. The bridge loan from year 1, amount and date. The car transmission repair, amount and date. The down payment I had made on equipment they couldn't afford that year, amount and date. The credit card charges, the lease co-signature, the car loan, the business loan. Each item had a receipt or a bank record or a signed document. I had not invented or inflated a single number. I talked for about 4 minutes. I know because I had practiced. When I finished, I set the folder on the table. "I didn't remove myself without warning," I said, looking at my mother-in-law directly. "I gave 18 months of warning through Derek. And I am not removing myself from the existing loan. I am beginning a process that will take months and requires the bank's approval. Nothing has been damaged that cannot be managed." The room was very still. Derek's father cleared his throat. "Those amounts," he said slowly, "are accurate," I said. "I have records for every one of them." My mother-in-law recovered faster than the others. "You kept records," she said, and the way she said it was meant to sound like a character flaw. "You've been keeping records on your own family." "I'm a financial analyst," I said. "I keep records on everything. It's how I knew the numbers well enough to help you when you needed it." Derek's uncle let out a short, involuntary laugh that he quickly swallowed. My sister-in-law was staring at the folder on the table with an expression I couldn't entirely read. She had not known the full scope of it. I could tell by the way she was doing the math on her face in real time. I picked up my bag. "I'll leave these copies for whoever wants them," I said. "I'm going to go now. Merry Christmas to everyone." I walked to the door. No one stopped me. My mother-in-law's voice followed me into the hallway, resuming something. "Finding a new angle." But I was already outside in the cold air with my keys in my hand, and the sound faded before I reached my car. I sat in the driveway for a moment with the engine off. My hands were completely steady. That, I had learned, was how I knew something was truly over. Not when I felt angry or hurt, but when I felt calm all the way down to my hands. I drove home and ordered Thai food and watched 3 episodes of a show I had been putting off because Derek didn't like it. Derek came home at 9:30. He closed the front door quietly, which meant he was managing something internally before he spoke. I muted the television, but didn't turn it off. He stood in the middle of the living room and looked at me for a long moment. "You planned that," he said. "I prepared for it," I said. "There's a difference." "My mother is," he stopped. Started again. "People are upset." "I imagine so," I said. "New information is often upsetting." "Maya." He sat down across from me. He looked genuinely tired, and for a moment I felt something that was not quite sympathy, but was adjacent to it. I had loved this man. I still knew exactly how I had loved him, what the shape of it had been. That knowledge sat inside me, like a scar that had fully healed. Present, permanent, no longer painful. "I need you to understand something," he said. "My family is not perfect. I know that. I know they've asked too much sometimes. But they're my family. And you are my wife. And what you did today." "What I did today," I said carefully, "was tell the truth in a room that had been given a version of events that left me out. I didn't yell. I didn't call anyone names. I showed documentation." "It was humiliating," he said. I looked at him for a long time. "Your mother told 40 people at your parents' birthday dinner that I didn't belong at the table," I said, "in a room that I had paid the deposit to hold, while I was sitting right there. And you told me she didn't mean it the way it sounded." He opened his mouth and then didn't say anything. "That was humiliating," I said. "What I did today was accurate." He left the room after that. I unmuted the television. We moved through December like 2 people navigating a house after the furniture has been rearranged, familiar enough to manage but aware that things were no longer where they had been. Derek and I did not fight. We were very polite with each other in the way that people are polite when they are both waiting for the other to begin a conversation that neither of them is quite ready for. His family went quiet, too, for a while. His mother stopped calling. His father sent Derek a message that Derek showed me, unasked, which I interpreted as its own kind of signal. The message asked whether things could be worked out. It was the first time any of them had framed it as a question rather than a statement. The co-signer release was approved in January. The bank notified me by email on a Tuesday morning while I was eating breakfast. I forwarded the confirmation to my attorney, and then I sat at the kitchen table and thought about all the mornings I had eaten at that table and started the day by quietly calculating what someone else might need from me before I thought about what I needed for myself. I called my best friend from college that night. She had been through 2 of her own versions of something like this, with different people, different structures, and she understood the specific exhaustion of being the person who holds things together past the point where they should have been put down. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Light," I said. "I feel light." "Good," she said. "Stay that way." Derek and I had the real conversation in February, on a Sunday morning. Sitting across from each other at the kitchen table with coffee we had both stopped drinking. There were no accusations in it. Or very few. That surprised me a little. I think it surprised him too. It was more like a quiet inventory, each of us naming things we had been aware of and not quite said. Finding that we had both known for longer than we'd admitted that we had built something that looked like a partnership from certain angles and from certain angles did not. He cried a little toward the end, which undid me more than I expected. I had prepared for his anger. Grief was harder. "I didn't protect you," he said. "From them. I should have." "No." I agreed. "You should have." "I'm sorry." I believed him. That was also the most painful part, believing him, because it meant the problem had not been his intentions. It had been his choices, which were something he could have done differently and hadn't. I moved into an apartment in March. It was small and quiet and had windows that faced east, which meant I woke up every morning with light in my eyes before I was fully awake. I did not hate it. I had been waking up in the dark for a long time. I am not going to tell you that the months after that were easy, because they weren't. Not entirely. There were nights that cost me something. There were moments in grocery stores and parking lots and Sunday afternoons when I felt the specific grief of a life that had not gone the way I had once imagined it. That grief was real, and I did not pretend it wasn't. But there were also other things. I took a trip I had been postponing for 2 years, a week in Portugal with 2 friends, and I walked along the coast in the late afternoon light and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a person who existed in full rather than a person who was always in service of something. I got a better offer from a competing firm in April and took it. The compensation was significant. I kept every cent of it in my own accounts and felt nothing but clean about that. I ran into my sister-in-law at a coffee shop in May. She was with a friend, and she looked well. She hesitated when she saw me, and then she crossed the room and said hello with the slightly raw quality of someone who wants to say more than they currently know how to say. I looked up some of those numbers, she said, from the folder. Okay, I said. I didn't know. She said it simply, without drama. And I believed that too. I know you didn't, I said. We stood there for a moment in the particular awkwardness of a relationship that had been redefined by events neither of us had fully controlled. Are you doing okay? She asked. Yes, I said. Really? She nodded. She looked like she might say something else and then thought better of it. She squeezed my arm once, quickly, and went back to her table. I thought about that for a while after, the arm squeeze, the I didn't know, the look on her face in the living room that Sunday in December when she was doing the math. She had not been the architect of any of it. She had just been someone who lived in a house that was being held up by someone else, unaware of the walls. I did not resent her for that. Resentment was one of the things I had gotten very careful about who deserved it and how much and for how long. My mother-in-law sent a text in June. It was brief. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said she thought we had all handled things poorly and that she had been under a great deal of stress. She did not apologize exactly, but there was something in the message that was reaching for something, even if it didn't quite find it. I read it twice. I typed a short reply that said I appreciated her reaching out, and that I hoped the business was stabilizing, and that I wished the family well. Then I put my phone down and poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the east-facing windows and watched the last of the evening light move across the rooftops. I had not been useless. I had been essential, and they had mistaken essential for permanent. Those are not the same thing, and the difference between them is the entire story. The version of me that sat at that birthday dinner table and said nothing, that drove home in the dark and told herself it would get better if she was just patient enough, that signed her name on documents because crying made her feel guilty, that version of me had not been weak. She had been waiting to be certain, waiting to be ready. When she was ready, she moved like water, quiet, thorough, and very difficult to stop. I keep a framed photo on the windowsill of my apartment now. It's from Portugal, from the last afternoon of the trip, and in it I am laughing at something one of my friends said, the kind of laugh where you're not thinking about how you look, where it is simply happening and you are simply in it. I don't remember exactly what she said. I remember only that the light was very good and that I was warm, and that for the length of that laugh, I was not carrying anything that did not belong to me. I look at it sometimes in the mornings, in the east-facing light, before the day asks anything of me. It reminds me what free feels like. And I don't intend to forget.